So, give me a second. I did kind of clean up my desktop, so all these pixels are the same. It's the only thing that's new. That and I switched my font to Comic Sans. So Apple just released the M1 chip. And here's kind of the problem I have with Apple. They make great software. Don't get me wrong. But the way they make their software kind of divides people like me who know how to use a computer, know how to build a computer and whatnot, and technical people, and people like one of my cousins who just know how to turn it on and use the software. But if you ask them to install an operating system or do anything technical, they'd be at a fucking loss. They'd have no idea what the fuck they're doing. They don't even know how to set up their own Wi-Fi. And Apple's very much for people like one of my cousins who don't know jack shit about technology. And, if you take a look at everything Apple's ever created, fucking iPhone wasn't the first smartphone, technically speaking. There were PDAs around the time that could do a lot of what the iPhone could do. The MP3 player came out long before the iPod. Almost everything Apple has ever made has existed for quite some time. But the difference is, if I take a run-of-the-mill MP3 player and plug it into my computer, it works as a flash drive. I can just copy and paste music files. You have to learn a different way of doing it with Apple's shit. And that's kind of the problem I have with Apple, is they make you unlearn what you already know how to do and learn it their way, instead of going with industry standards. Another thing is they made their own port instead of using USB. Shit like that. They've always done that. And it kind of creates a digital divide between, people who don't know jack shit about technology and get sucked into marketing, and Apple's very good at marketing, and people like me who actually know how to use a computer. The other problem I have with this is it only has 16 gigs of RAM. I'll get to that in a second, though. So, I do believe Apple is using TSMC, the same people who make AMD chips, or chips for AMD, rather. AMD is supposed to be moving to 5 nanometer, I think, next year or the year after. I don't remember, so don't quote me on that. But I do believe they're only giving you 16 gigs of RAM. And the problem with that is, if you are video editing, and I can attest to this because I've dealt with this myself, 16 gigs is good, but it's not enough. Video editing is one of those things where you could definitely benefit from having at least double that, if not more. Especially if you're going to be using something like DaVinci Resolve or, God forbid, Adobe Premiere. You can actually easily use up 128 gigs of fucking RAM. So, depending on how much you're into that sort of thing, 16 gigs isn't gonna fucking do shit. And it's not gonna be a good value. Security and all sorts of stupid shit. You can use your iPhone and iPad apps now on your desktop for some reason. That's cool, I guess. Linux can already do that if you look at UB ports, for example. It's not as fluent as Apple, though, because Linux takes some time. Let's just put it that way. But I actually do have a copy of DaVinci Resolve that I tried using, and good fucking luck. Because the problem with DaVinci Resolve is you need proprietary graphics drivers to use it, which is fucking stupid. So I'm going to stick with Kdenlive. I don't even know why I still have that on my laptop, honestly. I would like to get a Ryzen laptop, um, sometime in the future, but there is a problem where a lot of the things I want to learn how to use, like Blender, for example, I can't do on this laptop. Because this laptop, I can take a 4K video, transcode it to 1080p, and then edit it just fine, but it takes 12 hours to render. And a big portion of that is I have a 45 nanometer Linfield Core i7 in this fucking thing. It's a piece of shit. Now, Skylake was kind of where I noticed Apple might give up on Intel. And I was kind of naive in thinking they might go AMD. But it makes more sense that they'd pull something like this and make their own chip, honestly. And I wasn't surprised when they announced it either. Because Apple's always done that. Further the digital divide between, technical people like myself and noobs who just buy into the marketing. That's basically Apple's thing. That's what they do. So Skylake kind of became a problem, not just for Apple, but for me. That's when I kind of went against recommending Intel CPUs for anyone, because Apple was finding more bugs in the hardware than Intel was. And when you have a customer that's finding more bugs, you've got a fucking problem. That combined with the multiple hardware vulnerabilities that have come out that don't exist on AMD's processors. I honestly just can't recommend anyone use an Intel, even if it is on par or better in some cases than the AMD counterparts, because of those hardware vulnerabilities. Especially if you're using Windows, because of all the software vulnerabilities in that operating system. And then there's the fact that Intel's been on 14 nanometer for the longest fucking time, and it just seems like they can't adapt well, and they've basically really lost their edge. And it is a shame because, Intel used to be somewhat good, but I've always been more of an AMD person for CPUs, for the sole fact that they were the first ones to make a 64-bit processor. They were a very good value and very good option for the longest time until, fucking Bulldozer and shit like that happened. Those architectures sucked, and Intel really took over because of it. However, the innovations AMD's made, in my opinion, outweigh what Intel's made. It's just my opinion. And it is kind of backed up because, like I said, AMD made the first 64-bit CPU. They've made a lot of progress. They're the first ones to 7 nanometer for desktop and laptop. Intel can't say the same. And so I'm not surprised that, Apple is going this way. But if you're into the Hackintosh community, this is going to be a problem because obviously this operating system, Big Sur, was meant to use their Apple Silicon. And then the other problem, like I said, is RAM. It's not enough if you are professional video editing. It's just not. But, their marketing is probably going to swindle a lot of people into thinking it is. And I honestly would like to see where Apple goes from here, while at the same time not giving them any of my money. I do have an Apple TV not 4K, I have the HD model. I didn't go 4K because, it's the same price, but at the time I didn't have a 4K TV. And there's just not enough content on, in 4K, and I couldn't play 4K YouTube, so what was the fucking point? But that's kind of the problem I have with this. That, and now it's got this update to dynamic mode, which looks like shit because I liked it before when it just, had dark theme. And then there's the fact that I can't remove apps I'm not using. And I needed to download and subscribe to Apple Music on my Android, which, if you don't have access to the Google Play Store, good fucking luck, just to install apps, because there's no other way to just install apps if you buy an Apple TV, and that's the reason why I'm looking to get rid of this. Unfortunately, right now, it is the best TV streaming box, but aside from the Apple TV HD that I have, I don't own any other Apple products, simply because they suck. They are very much against right to repair, so if something breaks, you can't fix it. They go out of their way to make sure you can't fix it. Their software is very good, but it kind of goes against industry standards. If you're used to just taking files, like I said earlier, off of a fucking hard drive on your computer and copying it to your MP3 player, because your MP3 player basically works as a flash drive, that's not how you use an iPod. It's just these little fucking things that Apple does that pisses me off. And, you don't really have a choice in how your device looks. And this is one of the reasons why I'm very much not into switching back from Linux, and why I've used Linux for 13 years, because the amount of control you get in Linux is second to none. And I very much don't like, some of the decisions Apple makes, like this fucking dynamic mode on my TV. Their new macOS Big Sur looks like fucking deep in Linux. If you don't know what that is, look it up. And it's just going to further the digital divide, honestly. And I'm going to end the video here, but let me know what your thoughts are. Again, I'm not against them making their own chip. I'm actually not surprised they did, but I think this is going to be a good thing, and I think it's going to be a bad thing. It's going to be good for people who use Apple products. And it's going to be a bad thing because they could make these devices cheaper now, but they're not going to. Not by much, anyways. And on top of that, it's, like I said numerous times now, it's going to further the digital divide between technical people like myself and people who aren't technical. And that's basically, unfortunately, what Apple is they are very good at marketing, and they are very good at innovating, but they're not good at making anything really original. And that's just the way they've always been. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video.